It's been about 2 years since this whole iceberg thing started, and the trend has honestly come and gone. But that doesn't stop a lot of people here on YouTube from really loving the video type and wanting to see more of them. And I found this one, reposted to the Wendigoon subreddit, that was originally posted to the Iceberg subreddit by user... Let me find it right here. Truth is Scarier was the OP. And seeing as I still love making videos, even though this channel is dead in the water, I decided I'm gonna cover it because I think this stuff is freaking fascinating.
But with all that said, I would like to welcome you all to join me as we look into the most obscure, and in my opinion, the most absurd theories, Iceberg.
Michael Jordan's triple-double streak was to pay off gambling debt. Michael Jordan is a man who should need no introduction. He's often remembered as being one of the greatest basketball players of all time, and this is in large part due to his streak of successful games against the Detroit Pistons in the late 80s and early 90s. But something that isn't as well known but still understood is that Michael Jordan had a pretty significant gambling problem during a lot of his early career. In fact, it's speculated that his early retirement in 1993 was actually a way of saving face for Michael Jordan, as the NBA didn't want to be associated with him if his gambling problem worsened, so instead of firing him, they just had him retire at a rather odd point. So while I was recording this segment, I actually went back onto the original Reddit post and found that the OP had actually posted a Google Doc explaining all of the entries, which makes this video a little bit pointless, but who cares, I'm having fun. But I'm not gonna lie, the entry for this particular theory honestly seems like it's incomplete. Like, I'll put a screenshot of it up on screen, but as you can see, it says he had this double-triple streak and then it's just cut off. I think there was more to this theory and more to this entry that explains what it means, but I don't know. If the OP ends up seeing this, hopefully we can get some clarification on what that means. My best interpretation would either be that the games were rigged in order for Jordan to win, get a bunch of money, and pay off his debt, or because he had debt, he was motivated to play really well. I don't know. I tried to figure it out, but OP, please clarify. I'm begging you. Up next, we have James Garfield was purposely killed by his doctors. Now, this one actually has quite a bit of truth in it. James Garfield, the 20th president of the United States, famously had an attempt on his life when he was shot at point-blank range by, what's his name? Charles Guttel, this individual. Anyways, Garfield would go on to survive another 79 days after being shot. And while that is an impressive number on its own, modern experts agree that he could have easily survived this if it weren't for some gross malpractice by the people that were taking care of him during those 79 days. Specifically, we have to talk about a Mr. Dr. Willard Bliss, who was the primary physician taking care of President Garfield during this time. Dr. Bliss, as well as many of his contemporaries, were still hesitant to accept the idea of germs. Yes, as surprising as it may sound, back in 1881, germs and bacteria were still a very new concept and had only been around for no more than a decade at this point. And while the concept had been accepted overseas in the UK, in America, for whatever reason, we were still hesitant to accept new science, I guess. Americans are weird. And what's even weirder is that when Alexander Graham Bell, yes, the telephone guy, got involved with this case, he created a special metal detector specifically designed to find the bullet that was still lodged in Garfield's body. Other complications with the device notwithstanding, what was odd about this whole thing was that Dr. Bliss insisted that he only search the right side of James Garfield's body. This was because Dr. Bliss was certain that that's where the bullet was, even though he was wrong, and I guess wanted to keep his medical integrity. But regardless, for whatever reason he insisted, which led to Graham Bell not finding the bullet, which was in fact on his left. So, good going. Now, this is where the theory comes in. If you combine that whole bit about them being really hesitant to try to find the bullet properly, as well as the fact that they were actively ignoring the fact that germs and whatnot existed here, because I forgot to mention this earlier, but it's not like germs were a theory, they were understood to exist. but Americans just weren't having it for some reason. All this really makes you wonder, what if the doctors actually had some bad intentions during that time? Which is what this theory is proposing, that all of these doctors were intentionally being a bunch of dickheads because for whatever reason they wanted James Garfield dead. And if so, then I guess it worked, because he's 6 feet under now. Disney fakes ticket sales. I couldn't find anything relating to this online. Like, I literally went to page 2 of Google and still didn't find anything. So I guess it's just as simple as the idea that Disney might be faking their ticket sales, whether that be to Disney parks or to their movies. I think the reason that this is on this iceberg is because the implications of such could suggest that Disney is artificially inflating their own value in order to be a bit less competitive with their pricing and kind of gouge their own products worth a little bit. But you can make your own judgments about that. Extinct animal trading rings. This one seemed super vague to me at first, and I just thought that it meant that in a general sense, some thought to be extinct animals, such as, like, say, the dodo bird, saber-toothed tiger, were being traded illegally on the black market and are in fact not extinct. But no, according to the reference document, this is specifically talking about a trading ring in the Francophone African countries, which are the African countries that were colonized by the French and are still French-speaking. And it also says that these animals are a type of ape and a prehistoric lizard, which would lead one to the natural conclusion that what's actually being traded in sub-Saharan Africa are King Kong and Godzilla. Oswald wasn't aiming for JFK.
Now this is a conspiracy theory right here. Like, this is what I really wanted to get into when I first looked over this iceberg. This is of course talking about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy that took place at the hands of Lee Harvey Oswald. And the theory is that JFK wasn't actually the target, and that it was actually one of the passengers in the car with JFK by the name of John Canally. I'm going to try to give this theory as much context and explanation as possible without diving into Lee Harvey Oswald's entire life story. So I think the most reasonable place to pick up from is in early 1962, when Oswald returned to the United States after having stayed in the Soviet Union for 3 years. For those of you who don't know, and something that I didn't know until researching this, Oswald was a hardline communist. Like, he originally went to the Soviet Union because he wanted to become a Soviet national and live there for the rest of his life. And he only returned because he realized that living in the Soviet Union kind of sucked ass. But anyways, while he was gone, his discharge status from the Marine Corps was changed from honorably discharged to undesirable discharged, which basically means we don't want to see your face, we don't want to hear your name, we don't want nothing to do with you, don't come around us. And seeing as this was now the case, this wasn't really too great for Oswald, because now he was someone with a 9th grade education, someone who had spent time in the Soviet Union and tried to become a Soviet national, and he was undesirably discharged from the military. How is this man gonna find a job? And recognizing this is a significant problem, especially because he had a wife and a baby at this time, Oswald appealed to then Secretary of the Navy John Canally, who was a fellow Texan. He basically wrote him a letter asking, hey, so I screwed up, but as a fellow Texan and a veteran of the department that you oversee, do you think you could help a boy out? And what he got back was basically the 1960s equivalent of an automated voicemail saying, hey, thanks for writing. Remember to vote for me for governor of Texas come this election. This, reasonably so, would have pissed Oswald off. But the evidence doesn't end there, because just hours after the assassination, a notebook was found in Lee Harvey Oswald's apartment, specifically a green address book, which on its 17th page allegedly had a hit list on it, and at the top of that hit list was none other than John Canally. The reason I say allegedly was because this page was actually torn out of the book at some point, so what it actually had on it can never truly be known. And even if this wasn't the case, it never really made a whole lot of sense that JFK would have been the target of someone like Oswald to begin with. In terms of US-Soviet relations, JFK's presidency was probably the peak of that, something that Oswald definitely would have been on board with, and from all accounts, he never really bore any ill will towards JFK and actually respected a lot of his policies and actions with regard to the Soviet Union. In other words, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for him to want him dead. But John Canally, on the other hand, now that makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it? Especially when you consider all this evidence, and wow, Like, genuinely, wow. Now, of course, someone is definitely going to sound off in the comments about,
well, this doesn't make any sense because JFK's assassination was a conspiracy to begin with.
And yes, this totally does conflict with all of the other conspiracy theories about JFK's assassination. But I'm not here to debate that. What I am here to say is that it makes a hell of a lot of sense that Lee Harvey Oswald would have been aiming for John Canale. Government giant bone suppression. Oh my gosh.
Giants.
This theory is one you're likely already familiar with if you're watching this video, and it is of course the idea that remains of giants have been found by various governments but have been suppressed by those governments in an effort to preserve the idea of evolution and the model of the history of humanity. This is often brought up whenever pictures like these make their way around the internet. And of course, I think as we all can figure out, these are photoshopped, they're not real. Or maybe that's just what they want you to think. You have no sense of scale for this room. How do you know that I'm not a giant? Edison covered up original video camera. If I sound a little bit weird during these next few segments, it's because I was actually just really sick and only just now do I feel good enough to record. But anyway, this entry is talking about how, much like the light bulb, Thomas Edison did not invent the video camera, he only helped to popularize it. And while he often took credit for the technology, the actual inventor of the video camera was a French dude by the name of Louis Le Prince. Now this isn't the theory, like all of what I've just said is fact. The theory has to do with the fact that Louis mysteriously disappeared before he was able to bring his technology to the United States. And the theory goes that Thomas Edison had him killed so that he could be the one to introduce the video camera to the public in the United States and make a bunch of money off of it. Taylor paid Kanye for the 2009 VMA incident. This is of course referring to the incident that took place at the 2009 Video Music Awards, where while Taylor Swift was giving her speech up on stage, Kanye West interrupted her to promote Beyonce's album instead. Or at least I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But
I just got me a Mewtwo.
Now, this entry doesn't actually have a spot on the reference document, and I couldn't find anything about this theory online, but it's pretty self-explanatory what it's suggesting. I mean, back in 2009, Taylor Swift was not the megastar that she is today. She was definitely still up and coming, and a whole, scandal like this would be the perfect boost to get her really in the public eye. And it worked. She is one of the biggest pop artists of the past few decades. And if you keep in mind the other theories that exist that Taylor Swift sold her soul to the devil in order to get her fame, or the whole 100,000 album copies sitting in a warehouse, if you know about that one, then it kind of makes you wonder. That said, we have now come to the end of Tier 1. (9/11) fifth plane theory. Okay, so we are really jumping into Tier 2 with a absolute banger of an entry to start off with. When I first saw this entry, I was very interested to see what it was about, because I thought this was about to be some sci-fi story level theory. I don't really know what I was expecting, honestly, but what I certainly wasn't expecting was for it to be freaking true. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Apparently, this is 100% real. There was a fifth plane on 9/11, but it's not that simple. Now, as we know, on September 11th, 2001, 4 planes were hijacked, and only 3 of them successfully made it to their targets, with the 4th one, Flight 93, being retaken by some of the passengers on the plane and crashed into a field somewhere in Pennsylvania. But what a lot of people don't know is the story of Flight 23, of which there's still very little actually known. The story of United Airlines Flight 23 is still one that's shrouded in a bit of mystery, as the US government never publicly acknowledged it in the 9/11 Commission report or in basically any of the documentation after. But what we do know is that it was a scheduled flight from JFK International Airport in New York to LAX in Los Angeles, and that instead of taking off at 9 o'clock like it was supposed to, it was grounded like every other flight around the United States was. Now, like I said, because there's no documentation about this, we can't know what took place on the plane for sure, but allegedly, the pilots were ordered to barricade themselves within the cabin, as it had been reported by one of the flight attendants that there were 4 very suspicious Arab males sitting in the first class seating section. Apparently, the four had become agitated when they heard that the flight was cancelled, and they fled from the plane whenever it returned to the terminal. And on top of this, it's been reported that Al-Qaeda documents as well as box cutters, which again were the weapons used by many of the other terrorists, were found in their luggage upon being investigated. The pilot and the crew of the plane were questioned by the FBI, but the findings were, of course, never released to the public for whatever reason. If things look a little bit weird, that's because they are. I've changed, this room has changed, and there's a very good reason for that. I stopped working on pretty much all video projects that I was doing about 2 years ago to the day. I couldn't exactly tell you why. I don't really remember what my mindset was in August of 2022, but now it's August of 2024, and I've decided to come back and finish all this shit. Expect there to be a little bit of a tone shift throughout the rest of this video. As you could probably tell back in the earlier sessions, I was doing a bit of a Wendigoon impression, and that really just comes down to the fact that that was my inspiration for doing this video in the first place, and I didn't really know how else to act. But since then, I've, been kind of working on myself, figuring out my own voice, so you're going to hear that throughout the remainder of this video. That said, let's go ahead and get straight into this next entry. Titanic found in the 1970s. Okay, so this one doesn't have anything about it in the reference document for some reason, but that's okay because, the entry is pretty self-explanatory, so we can do our own research pretty easily. As we know, the Titanic was the invincible ship that never could. Said to be unsinkable, it collided with an iceberg in 1912, killing most of the passengers on board, including Jack, but he spared Rose, so it's okay. Or at least I think that's what happened. I haven't actually seen the movie. Just heard about the Titanic. Why would they get on that boat? Haven't they seen the movie? Or whatever the fuck. From the moment that the ship sank, many proposals were made and some carried out to attempt to find the ship and bring it to the surface. But none of these were successful until 1985, when an explorer by the name of Robert Bullard finally found the thing. He obviously did not bring it to the surface because that would have required a lot of balloons. Side note, some of the proposals for how they were going to get it to the surface are super interesting. At one point they proposed using 180,000 tons of molten wax. They thought they were going to fill it with ping pong balls. I'm not kidding, or at least I hope I'm kidding, because that is positively stupid. I don't know anything about ships. The conspiracy theory being alleged here is pretty self-explanatory, basically that they found it in one of these previous attempts and covered it up for some reason. I have no idea why they would do that. They were going to try repairing the hull and then filling it with compressed air, which I guess that could work. But at the same time, what are you going to do with the ship once you recover it? It's been rusted and corroded to bits. There wouldn't really be anything to gain from covering it up as far as I can tell. I mean, if you guys are aware, there's a different conspiracy theory that might get covered at some point, that the Titanic was actually a different ship called the Olympic that was sunk, and that the whole thing was some insurance fraud thing, and that's a super fun theory. This isn't really all that fun. It's super basic, and there's not a lot of stuff to support it as far as I can tell. As I said at the beginning of this video, not only are these the most obscure conspiracy theories, but some of these are also the most absurd conspiracy theories, but hey, I'm having fun, so here we are. Patterson-Gimlin Massacre. Okay, so this one is a good one. So this all revolves around the Patterson-Gimlin film, which you are currently seeing, and as I'm sure you've recognized by now, this is the Bigfoot video. This video is the most well-known and, by extension, most controversial piece of Bigfoot evidence to date. The original film was shot in 1967 in Bluff Creek, California. However, according to the Cryptid Wiki, the only place I could find talking about this theory, there is supposedly a longer cut of the film released in 2006, which showed 8 men killing a family of Bigfoot. I looked for the supposed 2006 cut of the film, but I couldn't find it. And I don't think I ever will find it, because by all accounts, the film doesn't exist. I think we all saw this coming. I mean, Bigfoot's existence is so debated already that anything surrounding it would be equally, if not more, questionable. But the idea of this lost film existing is still pretty cool to me, and I like to think that maybe it exists, even though it doesn't. Uncanny Valley Predator. Okay, I've been waiting to talk about this one because I've known about this theory for quite a while, and even though I don't quite believe it, I still find it super cool. So we all know about the Uncanny Valley, the Polar Express shit. It's when we look at something that's supposed to resemble a human face, but it doesn't quite work, and it makes us feel really uneasy. However, what people haven't quite been able to figure out is where exactly the Uncanny Valley comes from. Now, what this theory is proposing is super interesting, and depending on who you are, super terrifying. And basically, it's that at some point in human history, there was some sort of predator that existed that kind of looked like humans, but still fell into what we know now as the Uncanny Valley. And the idea is that because of this predator, humans develop the uncanny valley as a defense mechanism to recognize it. There are some interpretations of this theory that involve things like Neanderthals or other human-adjacent species that have since died out as being the source of the uncanny valley, like maybe they were the predators. Because if you look at our recreations of things like Neanderthals, they are kind of uncanny to look at. George Lucas' secret films. There's really not much to this theory at all. All it really is that Lucas has made mention of making secret films of some variety after having sold Star Wars to Disney. What exactly these secret films are is, well, it's a secret. Duh. And as is usually the case, people have done all sorts of speculating as to what they could be. Why this is on this iceberg, I'm not really all that sure about. I mean, as we just saw, there's not really a whole lot of substance here, so I think we'll just move on. Jordan LeBron footage cover-up. So, back in the year 2000, Michael Jordan and LeBron James played a pickup game together, and as far as we know, this is the only picture that survived. For whatever reason, there's no video, audio, or any other sort of recording of this game. Now, why might this be the case? Well, the idea is that LeBron just outplayed Jordan and he was embarrassed by it, and using his vast wealth and connections, had the video covered up. If this is true, then this is really embarrassing for MJ. I don't think I need to explain why. Will this affect LeBron's legacy? Let me know in the comments. Gangsters ghostwrite mob films. This one's super self-explanatory. It's just the idea that stuff like Goodfellas, The Godfather, Scarface, that they were all ghostwritten by actual gangsters. I literally couldn't find anything to support this theory at all, but the idea is super duper cool. Sacred Sword of the Patriots League. Okay, so the Sacred Sword of the Patriots League was a PSYOP that was conducted during the war in Vietnam by the CIA and MACV-SOG, which is basically Black Ops. Matter of fact, who actually plays them in Call of Duty Black Ops, so if you've ever played that, you know who I'm talking about. If what I'm about to say interests you, I highly recommend you do some further reading because I do not have time to cover all of what's in this Wikipedia page, but the short of it is that the Sacred Sword of the Patriots League was a code name for basically this fake revolutionary front that existed within North Vietnam. When I say fake revolutionary front, what I mean is that the CIA wanted the Viet Cong forces to believe that there was a South Vietnam aligned force in the North. The reason why this fake Freedom Front needed to exist was because if you're at all aware of the type of shenanigans that the CIA was getting up to around this time, you would know that they would probably need someone to take the fall for it. And what better than a freedom fighting force that doesn't even exist? Unfortunately for everybody involved, the SSPL was kind of a failure. It didn't really accomplish what it set out to do, and this was mostly due to mismanagement. This is especially so because the long-term goal of the program was to create an actual counter-revolutionary force within the North, but obviously this never panned out. Bella was connected to occultists, them. There's nothing about this on the reference document, and I'm having a pretty difficult time figuring out what this entry is referring to, but I did find this. I put the entry term into Google, as you do, and I found this. Who put Bella in the Witch Elm? Which is a piece of graffiti that appeared in 1944 following the 1943 discovery of an anonymous woman's remains that were found inside of a witch elm tree. The remains of the woman were found as an almost complete skeleton, which is weird because the body was never identified. The cold case got a lot of traction within popular culture, and as such, a lot of theories have been proposed. And one of these theories is that she was a Nazi spy. This theory was originally put forward when a writer to the Wolverhampton Express and Star, I'm assuming that's a newspaper, received a letter from someone who identified themselves as Anna of Claverley. Whoever this Anna of Claverley was claimed that she knew who Bella was, and according to her, she was a member of a spy ring investigating various things in England, I guess. I don't know, man. Not really sure what this has to do with occultism, but at least we can see the, I can't say that word, the Axis powers connection. We'll just say that. And with all that finally out of the way, we are officially done with Tier 2.